Hey everybody, it's Ashley. Welcome back into my kitchen. We are going to do scrap canning today, or what I'm calling scrap canning. This is going to be a way to can meat, can fruit, frozen foods, beans, things that you have around your house so that you don't really have to go out and either buy a bunch, grow a bunch. It's really trying to utilize things that you have as a way to save money on groceries, avoid food waste, make food that's easy and convenient, and kind of stops food spoilage before it happens. So I'm going to go around my kitchen and take a brief little inventory. I've kind of been thinking in my head this morning about the things that I have and trying to come up with an array of things that I could possibly use. And then I'm going to come up with something and can it. Mostly the things that I keep in these cabinets are sauces, oils, seasonings. You've probably seen me go in here for things like that before. I also keep things like seeds, some larger quantities of spices. I buy taco sauce in bulk, so I actually keep the big one in here as opposed to in my regular spice cabinet. I keep things like honey, not going to can chia seeds, but we keep some of that, and some baking things, coffee, tea, things like that. I actually just pulled out all my beans. I've got a lot of different kinds. I've got red beans, white beans, black, pinto, a small amount of pinto, and some garbanzo beans. So the kinds of things that I'm thinking about for this scrap canning is maybe not necessarily using a larger thing that I have, in a large quantity, but this little tiny bag of a quarter cup of pinto beans. Maybe I could combine the little bag with some of these bigger quantities in something. All right, so now let's take a look at the fridge and freezer. So we've got a lot of frozen fruit. We tend to eat that in smoothies, and I sometimes use them in like baking and things like that. We've got some mushrooms that look a little bit, maybe, I have some frozen broth, but that I like to keep frozen. So I have a pound of meat there. I didn't find a lot in the fridge. We really keep things pretty lean in there, and I'm pretty good about turning over the things that we buy every week. I've gotten into an awesome routine with weekly planning for my meals and really utilizing almost everything we buy. Part of the reason I'm able to do that is by using the recipes on the food guides that I have on my website. If you want to check those out, I know I've mentioned them before, but really they focus on single ingredients. So if you've got some zucchini that you want to use up, which I have 2 of, plus some other ones that I've actually already been working on, so they're not full, but you can go to the zucchini guide and say, okay, I have all these different ideas for recipes that I can use for cooking, baking, and things with just zucchini. So go check those out if you want. I'll link it in the description. I've worked really hard to try to make things really accessible. Again, to the same reason we're doing this scrap canning, to prevent food waste, to just kind of broaden your horizons with cooking. And it just gives you a lot of different options on how you can use all of these like random single ingredients. I mean, obviously you'll have other things in the recipes, but it gives you ideas on how to use those up. So I have 2 zucchinis in my basement freezer. Let me go see what I have down there and see if I can add anything to our list. Okay, so I found this big bag of black-eyed peas downstairs. So this week, I don't really have quite as much as sometimes I do, but I still want to challenge myself to try to preserve food and make sure that I'm reducing waste as much as possible. So I've got all these beans. I'm thinking I need to do something with beans. And so that means they're going to be pressure canning, which means I could also throw some meat in there. I'm thinking I can maybe find a recipe or create one for like a sausage bean soup, which would be great. Quick and easy lunches, meals. I mean, I even eat soup for breakfast sometimes. I did this morning. Maybe we could use the mushrooms. I found some more frozen fruit, frozen veggies, and meat downstairs. But I think I think the sausage with the beans would be really good. And so we've got broth already in the freezer. I think that's what we're going to do. So whenever you're canning beans and meat, I pressure can them. And I'm not too concerned about coming up with my own recipe, because the main things that I think are a concern when making your own recipes for canning are things like acidity, and we're not really dealing with that. We already know our stuff's going to be low acid. We're already going to be pressure canning. And then what you want to do is, depending on if you're using different vegetables, beans, meats, you want to always make sure that you're processing it for whatever ingredient takes the longest. So beans and meat, I think those both take the same amount of time, but it's an hour and a half. So we're going to be maxing out the length of time we're doing it. The other thing to think about when doing a recipe is things that create things that become very dense. So as long as I make sure my soup isn't too thick, I'm not worried at all about just maxing out our time on the pressure canner and going for something like that. We've got onions, garlic. The other thing I have a ton of, both upstairs in this cabinet to the other side of my microwave and in the basement, are tons of seasonings. So I have no doubts that we'll be able to make something super delicious. I'm gonna incorporate those mushrooms because they really need to be used. And we're gonna go with it. Now, because we're doing beans, this means this canning project's actually gonna have to wait till tomorrow. I'm gonna get some beans soaking here. I'm definitely gonna use my pinto beans. Let's see, sausage. What would go good with sausage? White beans would. Maybe I'll do white bean, red bean, pinto bean mixture. I don't think I want to do black beans in this, but I think that's going to be good. So I will find a mixture and we'll get these beans soaking. I like to soak mine for a long time. With a pound of sausage, I'm probably going to do a full pound of beans. And so to do that, I'm going to soak them in this half-gallon jar, because for every pound of beans, I put in about 8 cups of water. I mean, it'll be a little less, but it'll be close enough. I like to soak my beans in a combination of baking soda and salt, and it just kind of makes them a lot more digestible. That's 2 ounces. We'll do 6 maybe of these. And the rest we'll do white. All right, just a little bit over, and then we'll put in 3 tablespoons. No, I'm sorry. Just under 2 teaspoons of baking soda. I've been doing this a lot recently, so I've got it all very easy to remember. And then about 3 tablespoons of salt. This is just sea salt. And then I'm going to put water in here and just let them soak. I'm going to get my meat. I'm going to put my meat in the fridge so that it can thaw. The mushrooms can stay frozen. And I'm going to kind of think about a recipe, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. All right, here we are the next day. I've got the beans all soaked, and you can see it easily doubled in size. I've been thinking about a few things over the last day that I wanted to mention, and one of them is that when you can beans, the recommendation is always to cook them, soak them, and then cook them. I have done that before, and I don't like the results. So today we're gonna just soak them, and then they're going to cook while they're being canned. I know some people can them dry. Sometimes the recommendation is to soak them because they get so much larger, and it's just a better way to know what's gonna fit and make sure that they're completely covered in liquid and things like that. So I'm comfortable doing it this way, but if you are not, certainly don't do it this way. You can, for anything that I'm doing today, because I am making my own recipe here, if you're not comfortable doing that, or if you're new to canning, definitely go with like the ball canning books, or you can look at, you know, the food preservation sites and things like that. That are more official and give like very specific instructions. So definitely lean on those if you feel like you want to. So I got a few various spices out. I've got garlic powder, onion powder, crushed red pepper. I was thinking maybe a little of spice because my sausage is not spicy. Pepper, seasoned salt, and then some smoked salt. I've had this around for a while. I thought this would be a good kind of like scrap to use up. Won't use all of this, but the smokiness I thought would be really good with the beans and the sausage. And then I've got some broth. It's still frozen. I'll just thaw this quick in the microwave, and then we can get that in. And I also want there to be a distinction between cooking with scraps in order to, you know, prevent them from getting spoiled or going to waste, and cooking with things that have already spoiled. You obviously never want to can with food that's already, you know, super past, moldy, anything like that. Canning will not save that food. So just to be clear, it's not a part of what we're doing here. When doing a recipe like this, you can put all of the vegetables into your jars raw. I prefer to saute them. I made a verde chicken chili that turned out amazing, and I mentioned how I like to do this in that video as well. The chili turned out amazing. I'll link the video in case you want to see how I made it. Finally to the point where we're going to be filling these jars, and this is where I'm a little unsure about amounts and how many jars we're going to get, because it's not a tested recipe where it knows the yield. Every pint, of course, is 2 cups, but if we leave an inch of headspace, which is what all these sort of contents typically has you do, it brings it down to about 1.75 cups. We have about 6 cups of beans and another almost 6 cups of meat and veggies, so that's 12 cups total. So if we want our jars to maybe have 1/2 cup of broth, 1/2 to 3/4 cup of broth, that means we need to fill it about half full with everything else. So let's start with 2/3 cups of beans and see how that looks. With the 2/3 cup of beans, I added 1/3 of a cup of meat, and it came out perfectly. I did about the same with the vegetables, and it came out as well. For the seasonings, I just eyeballed it. I added some of each of the seasonings I mentioned earlier, which is the smoked salt, onion and garlic powders, some black pepper, crushed red pepper, and some seasoned salt. Now for the broth, these jars took way more broth than I anticipated they would. They actually used all 5 of the pint jars I had in the freezer, which was actually so great to get those used. It came out almost perfectly. We will see if I should add more of the other ingredients next time. I'll be able to tell once we give this soup a try. I'd much rather have more broth than not enough. You can always mash the beans up a bit to create a creamier or thicker soup, but if it's way too thin, next time I'll know I can just fill the jars higher with the other ingredients. Here is our soup all done, ready to be enjoyed, probably sooner than later. Aside of the one pan, it was a pretty clean job too, which is so great. If you do scrap canning or would make this soup, let me know in the comments. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you soon.